Do you find yourself daydreaming about maybe spending more time with grandkids, your favorite hobbies or other fun, and less time thinking about going to work each day?
If you have the itch to trade in your career for traveling, volunteering, or other fun, then it may be time to retire.
We take you step by step through the transition once you do decide it's time to retire. Right now on Retiring Today.
Welcome to Retiring Today. Are you thinking about maybe trading in your workwear or your computer for, fishing or maybe some kind of hobby? Well, if you're thinking about that day, this is a great episode for you because we're gonna take you step by step with what you can do when you're ready to retire. I'm here with two people that help people retire every single day. Loren Merkle, he's a certified financial planner and a certified financial fiduciary. And this is Abby Huntrod. She's a retirement income certified professional and a certified financial fiduciary. And Loren, you've helped hundreds of people retire. You've seen it several times. There's a mindset shift as they get close.
Yes, there definitely is, because if you think about it, for a long portion of your life, you have a structure, you have a routine where you get up, you take care of the kids, you do all the things you need to do, then you go to work, and the kids get older, the kids go out of the house, but you're still getting up and then you're going to work. So the one constant throughout this whole process is you're getting up and you're driving to work and you're driving back home, you're going to bed, you're getting up, and that just continues to take place. What we find is that eventually people start to transition their mindset to, there's a time where I'm not going to want to get up and go to work. I'm going to want to get up and go see the grandkids, or I want to get up and get in the RV and travel across the country at their will. And as you start to approach retirement, what we find is that those types of thoughts become much more prevalent. And you find yourself at work even daydreaming about this time where you don't have to get up and then drive to work. You can get up and you can go fishing, or you can do the traveling or the volunteering or all these other things that you have a passion for that you really haven't been able to adequately explore because most of your time is consumed with this thing called work.
And Abby, it's a really exciting time, I would think, to think about retirement, but it's also got to be a little bit overwhelming as you think, okay, now what's next?
It is overwhelming, and that is the power of the plan. That's the power of working with professionals that have helped families through this transition before, because there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of decisions to make, and you want to make sure that you're making those decisions in confidence, which is why we have developed the Merkle Retirement Method, and that incorporates 5 guiding principles. So the first principle is the income planning, and then we of course have the tax planning, the legacy planning, the investment planning, and the healthcare and long-term care planning. So those are the 5 big components that should be incorporated in any retiree's plan as they're thinking about jumping and making that big life transition.
Okay, so the theme of today's episode is you've decided to retire, and now what? We're gonna take you step by step through some of the things you can be thinking about, some of the things you can be doing as you get set to make that next step in your life. So first, let's go with step 1. Visualize your lifestyle plan. I kind of like this one. This is the really fun one. But interestingly enough, Loren, this is kind of the first conversation you have with people when they walk in the office. It's not necessarily all about numbers and savings and accounts and all those things. It's really, what do you want your lifestyle plan to be?
The lifestyle plan is a lot of the fun, and where the fun, people really get to explore the fun, because these are all the activities that you are going to engage in once you do retire. So this is what you have been dreaming about for all of these times, but what we often find is that there's not a lot of organization around those activities as far as how are you going to be able to afford those activities, what kind of structure are you going to have throughout your week. So there's not necessarily a lot of thought around the structure or the organization. There's just a lot of daydreaming and thought of, I would rather do something besides what I'm forced to do or feel like I'm forced to do every single day. So the lifestyle plan is one of the most overlooked components of the retirement plan, because you have some thoughts that you want to do something different, but what does that really mean? And being able to put something on paper to say, here's some of the passions I have, here's some of the passions that I want to revisit from way before or look into, and then what does that look like daily or even weekly? Because what that does, if that can be organized successfully, is it helps that transition. It helps the transition from what I would call ultra structure, where you know exactly every day what you're going to do almost by 15 15-minute segments to a time frame where now you have all this time, and many people end up leaving the workforce, and Monday morning they wake up and what am I going to do next, right? So this helps with some of that structure and activity and helps with that transition from the working years to the retirement years, where you can find a new purpose to fill fulfillment, to replace really what many people have grown as their identity, which is their old career.
And it's not, Abby, we may be thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not just how you're going to fill the time, it's where you're going to live too.
Yeah, that is an important factor in it, because we think about community and the importance of staying engaged and involved with a network of, people. We're meant to do life with other people, and a lot of times when we leave, our careers, we're giving up a network, a community of people that we, did a big part of our life with. And if they're not retiring at the same time, then those schedules and that structure, that looks different. So a common conversation that we have, or that I have, is maybe retired husband and wife, they want to relocate to be closer to the grandkids. Well, that's great, and that plays into the purpose and the day-to-day structure if they're going to be engaged with family, but then they lose out on the community that they had maybe in the place that they lived for 30 years. And so just thinking harder about some of those elements, does that mean maybe when we move and relocate to warmer temperatures or relocate to be closer to grandkids, are we going to move into a cooperative living type housing arrangement in order to kind of have that built-in network? Or if not, how are we going to meet new people and make new relationships? And so it's a lot more involved than I think is often thought about, and it's just something that you need to be intentional with.
All right, let's get to step 2. You're ready to retire, and now what? Engage in a planning process. That's an important step.
It is an important step, because this is where we start to gather the details of how you're going to be able to afford this lifestyle that you want to have for this next phase of your life. So we're looking at what types of deadlines do you have. If you have a pension, you're going to have some pension filing deadlines. If you're Medicare age, you're going to have some Medicare filing deadlines. All of these different things need to be looked at and again organized, and that's really the main benefit of the proprietary Merkle retirement method it's a process to structure each one of these steps and phases into a way that makes sure that you're hitting each one of the deadlines and gathering all the information that you need to make the decisions that you're going to have to make going forward into retirement.
Abby, step 3, consider expenses. And a lot of times for pre-retirees, that's something they haven't had to do or monitor as closely as when they're in their high wage earning years. Kids are off and out of the home. Now it's time to talk expenses again.
Yeah, and we're not necessarily talking about a budget per se, but having an idea around maybe how much you can afford to spend given the different resources that you have at your disposal. But you want to make sure that you can cover your baseline expenses at a minimum, and that your retirement plan, your income plan, is still sustainable, all the way out to age 100 or all the way out to the age that you think is appropriate for your retirement plan. So not budgeting, but just kind of getting a better feel for what those monthly spend levels are.
And Loren, step 4, once you know what the spend levels are, then you can start talking about income analysis.
Income analysis that involves increasing your spendable income. So you've retired, you have these finite amount of resources, and now it's a matter of how do you get the most out of this life savings that you have. One of the most effective ways to do that is to decrease the level of tax that you pay. There's $29 trillion in retirement savings. The vast majority of that $29 trillion in this country is all pre-tax, which means it has never been taxed. So now it's a matter of when you take that money out of your pre-tax accounts, how do you pay the least amount of tax possible? And talking about deadlines is for most of the effective tax planning strategies, the deadline is 12/31 of that year. So you can't wait until the spring of next year when you file your taxes to incorporate these strategies, these most effective strategies for current year. So 12/31 for these types of strategies are typically the deadline.
And so Loren did kind of wrap step 4 up right in there in step 3. So step 4 is evaluate tax planning opportunities. And then we have one more step to take when you say, I'm ready to retire, now what? And it's an engage in risk analysis.
Yeah, it's important to measure where you're at from an investment standpoint risk-wise, because those first handful of years are the most important when we talk about sequence of return risk. So you don't want to go through an '08 or an '09 type experience where you lose, 40% of your portfolio, and then that changes your retirement plan. That forces you to, pursue a part-time job or come out of retirement simply because maybe you weren't aware of how much risk you really were exposed to within your portfolio. So at point of retirement is a great time to assess, does the risk in my investments still align with my goals and objectives now that I'm on the doorstep of retirement?
And you might be wondering if your goals and objectives do align with your risk. There's a great resource for you. It's merklerisk.com. You can go there and you can take a risk analysis and see where you're at with that. But we're going to continue to talk about you're ready to retire and now what? How to talk to your employer when retiring today continues.
Don't let 2020 derail your retirement. Join us for a live online webinar on Wednesday, December 2nd at 2 p.m. During this webinar, you'll discover how to use market volatility to your advantage, tax-saving strategies to grow your retirement savings, and investing mishaps and how to avoid them in a down market. Register now for this complimentary webinar by visiting merkleplan.com.
You've heard stories from your family and friends. You may have even received a few calls from sales agents who want you to purchase this plan or that plan. Misinformation about Medicare is everywhere. How do you know what is important and what is just noise? Join us from the comfort of your own home for a live online Understanding Medicare webinar on Tuesday, December 8th at 11:30 a.m. Register now by visiting merkleplan.com.
Welcome back to Retiring Today. So you've decided to retire, and now what? That is what we're discussing in today's episode. I'm here with Loren Merkle. He's a certified financial planner, and this is Abby Hunt-Rods. She's a retirement income certified professional. So a lot of times, guys, people are ready to retire, and they come sit down and they talk to you. Loren, what we're going to discuss in this segment is kind of how to handle your current employer. And so what are some of the first steps you should take once you've decided to retire?
Well, this is going to vary depending upon what your relationship is with your employer. There's some families that we work with that they can give them a 6-month notice, a 12-month notice, and it works really well. The employer appreciates that because now they have some time to fill that role. And then there's other families that we work with that they don't want to give them any more than a 2-week notice because they're afraid of the reaction from the employer. And then there's specific things like maybe they have to be on board for until a certain date for a bonus, right? Or there's other financial incentives where they need to make sure they time this really well. So it does depend upon the relationship with your employer and what the reaction from your employer may be, but there should be a checklist that you put together based on your particular situation of things that you need to do as you transition to the retirement time frame, and it should specify those actions with the employer, and we'll give you a few ideas here today.
And that checklist, Abby, couldn't include talking about your pension or looking into the specifics of your pension.
Yeah, requesting pension information and making those decisions often takes longer than individuals realize. It can take 3 to 6 weeks to even get the pension packet. So you think about rolling over your 401k, and that's a pretty quick turnaround. And I think a lot of times that's the expectation on the pension side as well. So we just want to talk through those different pieces and make sure that we've requested the information so that we can make these decisions in a timely manner.
And with the pension, since we're on that topic, be careful of your timing with retirement and when you take your pension. This year, just this year, we've had multiple families postpone their retirement by 2 months. 2 months because they knew, based on the pension, the way it was designed and what their plan was, they knew they wanted to take the lump sum amount from the pension, roll it to their IRA, and all they had to do was wait an additional 2 months and they got an extra $50,000 in pension payout. But they wouldn't have known that if we didn't look at what's the pension payout now versus just a couple months down the road. And by doing that evaluation, then they made that decision and say, 2 months is worth an extra $50,000 of lump sum payout. So as it relates to the pension, compare what it would be if you retired at this point versus this point, and then you can make that decision.
And do you have to request the pension packet to get that information, or are they well aware of how they can get that, or how they can work with you to get that online or through the carrier?
Yeah, that's going to vary per pension as well. There are some pensions that you can go online and you can run an estimate based on if you retire at this point versus this point, and literally within just a couple minutes you can receive that data. And then there's other pensions that you have to fill in a request to get the estimate, and it could take 2 to 4 weeks just to get that estimate back to see what your different pension options would be. So that's part of what we help with, is to help weed through the nuances of that particular pension and get the information necessary so you can make the best decision possible.
Abby, let's go back to 401ks or accounts. Consolidating accounts can sometimes be something to think about once you've decided to retire.
Yeah, a lot of times it makes sense to get a little bit more organized with the portfolio and consolidate accounts that you can. So as you leave an employer, if you have old 401ks from previous employers, it's a great time to kind of roll everything into an IRA, a Roth IRA, depending on the tax classifications of the different accounts, so that you can be intentional and a little bit more proactive around how the portfolio is designed. When we are thinking about the transition into retirement, we want to make sure that the portfolio is efficient, that it's cost effective, that your investment costs aren't too high, that you're truly diversified, and that there's as much transparency as possible around the different investments that you have. So it's just a lot easier to manage all of that if you can consolidate into a fewer number of accounts. And then, of course, with that in mind, also developing that income plan. So as we are deciding where to pull income from, those W-2 wages go away and you now have to turn this big pile of money into income. What's the best way to deliver that income? Well, if you're retiring early, maybe prior to 59 and a half, if you have the 401k, if you retire from your current employer at 55 or older, then you can deliver income from that 401k without having to pay early distribution penalties. So there's a few different variables that need to be considered, because what we don't want to have happen is you consolidate everything into an IRA and you retire at 57, and now our hands are tied and you can't access that money without penalties. So just having a plan and knowing why we're doing what we're doing with the different pieces.
And as you get ready to retire, one thing you have to think about, Loren, is healthcare.
One of the biggest concerns that pre-retirees and retirees have today is this healthcare. There's a study out there that says people 65 and older are going to spend $280,000 over the course of their retirement just on healthcare. That doesn't even include long-term care. So the question is how is that going to be afforded within your plan? What is the best resource or combination of resources that you can use to deliver that income that you're going to need from a healthcare perspective to make sure that you have the care that you need, the care that you deserve, and it's not going to disrupt the income that you're going to want for this lifestyle that you've been dreaming about all these years too.
Yeah, and if you're younger than 65, it's an even, I think, bigger piece of the puzzle.
There's never been a more popular date than 63 and a half for retiring now. And the reason why is because if you were to go out on the open healthcare market and purchase healthcare as a couple, you might be spending $2,000, $2,500 a month. Now that does not fit within a lot of retirees' budget just for healthcare. 63 and a half, if you have qualified coverage from an employer, now you can carry COBRA for the next 18 months, which will get you to age 65, which means now you can switch over to Medicare and potentially have a lot more affordable healthcare situation. So 63 and a half for a lot of people is their planned retirement date because of healthcare.
And another important deadline I want to touch on is, oftentimes individuals wait until they are ready to retire to go ahead and then file for Medicare, file for Social Security. And Medicare can take 4 to 6 weeks to really be fully effective, just because the processing time of the application, is that long. So those aren't fun conversations to have, but we've had families who are retiring, Friday, and they're hoping that their Medicare coverage is effective, the next week.
Sure.
And that's just not how it works. So understanding, okay, we need to file a few months in advance for the Medicare to make sure that everything's in place when it needs to be.
Yeah, and you mentioned Social Security, so electing Social Security, also something you're thinking about at the same time you're thinking about retirement. What do you need to do?
The same timeline applies with the Social Security. So as far as deciding when to file for your benefits, we would just be strong advocates for the analysis. As a married couple, you have 81 different options when it comes to filing. So know what your options are and know which of those filing strategies makes the most sense for you in your retirement plan. And then we help our families file for those benefits at our office so they don't have to, go down to the administration and work through that on their own. But also knowing that that's a permanent decision. So after 12 months, you can't change the decision that you make with Social Security. I had a conversation last week with a client who they were wanting to file for the husband's benefit right away at 62 in 1 month. And then we're like, well, with COVID, he actually might have a hard time finding his replacement. He might end up working maybe 6 more months. And so we talked about the earnings limit and, being sure that he was going to retire, that income was going to go away, because we don't want to file for Social Security and then have it all taken back because, you decided to work part-time or work and earn more than you are allowed to at that point.
Yeah, that's the power of thinking these things through thoroughly and talking to a professional before you make these decisions. Now it's time for our Ask the Advisor segment. This question came to us from Kim in West Des Moines. Kim wants to know, should I take the lump sum option or a life annuity payout for my corporate pension? We'll answer Kim's question and much more when Retiring Today continues.
You've heard stories from your family and friends. You may have even received a few calls from sales agents who want you to purchase this plan or that plan. Misinformation about Medicare is everywhere. How do you know what is important and what is just noise? Join us from the comfort of your own home for a live online Understanding Medicare webinar on Tuesday, December 8th at 11:30 a.m. Register now by visiting merkleplan.com.
Don't let 2020 derail your retirement. Join us for a live online webinar on Wednesday, December 2nd at 2 p.m. During this webinar, you'll discover how to use market volatility to your advantage, tax-saving strategies to grow your retirement savings, and investing mishaps and how to avoid them in a down market. Register now for this complimentary webinar by visiting merkleplan.com.
Welcome back to Retiring Today. Here is the question we got from Kim in West Des Moines. Kim says, should I take the lump sum option or a life annuity payout for my corporate pension? I'm here with Loren Merkle and Abby Hunt-Rods. Loren, what would you tell Kim?
I would say, Kim, just like your retirement plan, the answer to your question is not a cookie cutter answer. What I mean by that is take a look at your particular pension and look at all of the different options that you are offered through that pension. And then do an analysis to say, if you take the lump sum option, here's how much you would receive versus the annuity option. Here's how much you'd receive over the course of your lifetime based on some assumptions, of course. And if you want to vary this example and use different assumptions for the just in case, that's good too. But then you need to also take into consideration some of the outside risks. As an example, if you take the annuity payment through the pension, then there is some company or pension risk. Right? If you take that annuity, it's a lifetime payment. So as long as you're alive, you're anticipating to receive that payment. But what if the pension goes under or the company goes under? There is some risk associated with that as well. If you take that lump sum and then you invest it into the market or something else, and then the market erodes it by 30%, well, there's some risk associated with that. So all of this needs to go into consideration and be worked in to your retirement plan, your income plan, to make sure that you're making the best decision possible.
Abby, we started the show off by saying if you're spending more time daydreaming about maybe fishing, spending time with grandkids or other hobbies, then it might be time to retire. So our takeaways kind of start with that. in order to retire, you need to kind of start thinking about what's next for you.
Yeah, think about that lifestyle plan. Think about your purpose, your community, and what structure you will have for you and your family, your spouse in retirement.
And the next takeaway from today's show is think about the deadlines, Loren. There are some things you've got to do maybe sooner than the day before you retire.
There are a variety of deadlines that you're going to encounter that are custom to you based on what you're trying to accomplish in retirement and the resources that you have. So make sure you make a list of those different deadlines and you don't miss them.
And Abby, the last takeaway is the plan can change. You monitor the plan, you look at it. What you think you want to do when you're 65 is not maybe the same thing you want to do when you're 75, and that's okay.
Yeah, and monitor the ongoing risks that we don't have as much control over, like legislative risk. If tax rates change, that's going to change our planning. Market risk, the retirement phase is a little different than the accumulation phase, where it's not just a set it and forget it type strategy. So it tends to be a little bit more hands-on and proactive. And then, of course, the long-term care risk, the long-term risks that we don't know if it's going to be an issue, but as life unfolds and those things change, you have to make adjustments with those developments.
And when it comes to retirement planning, Loren, there is a lot to talk about. And there's an opportunity for a little bit more conversation at our complimentary workshops.
At Merkle Retirement Planning, education is at our absolute core. This is why we love to teach these different workshops, because we can talk at a really high level, but then with the participation from people who go to the classes, we can get into some really good, meaningful details that are specific to the audience there. So we have a lot of fun. We'll have a little bit of snacks and some drink, and we just have a good time talking about what it looks like to successfully retire in all the different components, some of which we touched on here today, that can go into your retirement plan to make sure that you are ready for that next lifestyle transition.
And we have workshops that talk about that next lifestyle transition. We also talk about Medicare and healthcare. So go to merkleplan.com to see our workshop is near you and the topics that we'll be talking about. And Loren, when I come to the workshop, do I need to bring anything? Should I have any documents? Or is it more just a time for me to kind of just start thinking about all the pieces of the puzzle?
Bring yourself and your desire to learn, because we're going to talk about a lot of the things that you should be considering as you approach the retirement time frame and then make that transition. We will have a pen and paper there for you to take notes. So really, there's nothing to bring except for a good smile and a good attitude, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
Okay, and a lot of fun is what we try to do with the education pieces we have. We also have a podcast. It's called Retiring Today. It's a great way to get retirement information on the go. We try to be timely and topical, and we have a lot of fun when we get in that podcast booth and talk about, we veer off track just a little bit from retirement, but have a lot of fun as well. But we'll continue to stay on track with talking about your retirement vision on this show. It's Retiring Today, and we thank you for watching.
Don't let 2020 derail your retirement. Join us for a live online webinar on Wednesday, December 2nd at 2 p.m. During this webinar, you'll discover how to use market volatility to your advantage, tax-saving strategies to grow your retirement savings, and investing mishaps and how to avoid them in a down market. Register now for this complimentary webinar by visiting merkleplan.com.
You've heard stories from your family and friends. You may have even received a few calls from sales agents who want you to purchase this plan or that plan. Misinformation about Medicare is everywhere. How do you know what is important and what is just noise? Join us from the comfort of your own home for a live online Understanding Medicare webinar on Tuesday, December 8th at 11:30 a.m. Register now by visiting merkleplan.com.
From our family to yours, we hope you have a wonderful weekend.
We hope you enjoyed the show.
We'll see you next week.